Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Oskar Lewczyk, Oskar pyta o miasto, Fundacja Napraw sobie miasto. Dzisiaj jesteśmy z profesorem Hubertem Klumpnerem z Politechniki w Zurichu i firmy Urban Think Tank też w Zurichu, która zajmuje się projektowaniem urbanistycznym w różnych trudnych takich miejscach. Hello, how are you?
Yes, it's great to be here with you in the south of Poland in Silesia.
Okay. You're running company Urban Think Tank, which specializes in this, like urban so-called planning, because actually this is not like, this is more like in urban interventions in very specific areas. It's like your main place of work for some time was like Caracas in Venezuela.
Yes.
Would you talk us a little about these projects?
Well, in reality, we like to work in places that go through transitions. There are great opportunities to go to cities where changes are happening. Those can be positive changes. Sometimes they can also be destructive. You know, man-made and natural catastrophes equally create big transitions. And we have found that going in the places and innovating actually at the moment where maybe the people in those cities most need it is one of the most rewarding opportunities in architecture and urban design. This is where we work also in slums, but we equally working in shrinking cities. I just learned that this is also a shrinking cities.
Yeah, exactly.
A shrinking city, but we did work in Detroit before, a very famous city that even went bankrupt. It's the first city in the United States that in the 20th century went bankrupt. Those places actually need architects too, and innovation and new ideas. And we have also found that the projects that we are doing, most of them came actually out of our own motivation. They were unsolicited, but they were needed because we spent time in those cities. We're not going to a city because somebody calls us. We go there because we are interested. We spend time there. I'm not originally from Caracas, Venezuela. I lived in New York before, but I decided with my partner Alfredo Brelenburg to move to Caracas and to stay there. And we lived there for more than 12 years. And we made projects on site. And many of the projects taught us important lessons. I think lessons that are equally interesting for European cities, for Eastern European cities, for cities in China or Africa. We're working in many different places and we're spending a lot of time in those places. And what we have found is that there are not absolute solutions, that master plans are bound to fail. And what we really need is more transitory, incremental ideas that might not be perfect, but they're creating an incredible advance in qualities in those places. So we're not looking for this absolute best solution, what we all dream of. We don't believe that cities in Asia need to become Singapore. We think it's just fine to build Calcutta, but 10 times better than it is now. Or Hong Kong, which is right now going also through a revolution, if you want so. And to actually work with people who want to change after a social transformation, also their physical environment. This is basically it. We are getting involved at a moment when it is not only about executing a building, but it is about a governance question. It is about building new institutions, co-designing with citizens, developing ideas and methods, and then actually, and this is our work that you can find in different ways for infrastructure. We build cable cars, we build vertical sports stadia, we're building right now a maker space in Barranquilla around the topic of the Carnival. These are for us moments of crystallization of those ideas. This is not necessarily the only reason why we are there. This is the proof of evidence that urban projects are successful, that we can actually test them through architectural prototypes. And if we develop those ideas, they are free to use, to you, to anybody else. And we have just started to use also new technologies, for instance, blockchain technologies, to spread those ideas in the world.
Okay, but what you mentioned that actually you try to create something 10 times better, like you mentioned Calcutta,
Yep.
but when you told that, actually I thought about gentrification.
Yes.
And actually this is like a dream come true of every mayor, especially in here in Poland, that actually you have like some shabby place and then you get rid of the old buildings, old people and so on, and you create brand new glamorous city just to sell it for much more money and so on. But actually this is not the way you work.
Yeah. What you describe is obviously what happens everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And every mayor wants to be the smartest mayor with the greenest city and the best tax income, and he wants to shine.
And
But
with the richest citizens.
maybe. But we are working for instance, at the moment in Medellín in Colombia. Medellín was famous for Pablo Escobar. It was famous for Colombia. It was famous for having a civil war for the FARC. But today, Medellín is actually transforming. It is not a perfect city, but Medellín has actually developed its own way of innovation. It is not copying other places. Today, mayors from around the world actually going to Medellín to figure out not how Medellín built a particular building, but they're interested how Medellín was able to get from being the most dangerous city in the world to the city which it is today, which is a city where the citizens have reconquered their public space and where people, even in the barrios, poor people, have actually created an attitude and have created opportunities, built libraries, traffic and mobility systems. It has become a laboratory of urbanization. This is why I love Latin America so much, because I think that we have to take people in cities more serious. People in cities have become, in many, many places, basically the audience that is sitting on a chair and looks in the television to understand what somebody else decided for them. And we believe your point about gentrification is very, very important. We believe that the people in their own cities can become the agents of change. They need assistance, they need a moderation process, but they also need to be taken serious as co-designers. We are working very strongly with a movement which is called citizen science. In the citizen science, anybody who lives in a city is actually seen as an expert. A person who lives for 50 years across the street here knows this road better than any expert who can come from some other place and spends maybe a week or mount some sensors on the street corners. We need to take people serious and build them in the design process, and then they will also appreciate if the value of a place rises. We have to share this rise, because then we are building real sustainability. A lot of projects suffer, actually. That is also something that we found out, because the whole profession wants solutions too fast. We have seen that some of the better projects took more time. I think we have to take more time. It is not about making a maximum number of projects, but we should make better projects. The question is that we have to reinvent not only the architectural profession, but we have to reinvent also the processes, because I think that the value that architects and urban designers can create together with citizens is a lot higher than the price or the honorarium that architects get paid. And this is why we're actually expanding what an architect is doing without abandoning the building. We're still doing buildings, but we're doing a lot more. And part of it is also the monitoring of projects over time. I think we learned the most about interventions if you don't walk away from a building, but if you build sort of a monitoring process after finishing a piece of architecture to understand how it actually is changing. And that is for us also like the patina of a material. Also a building is aging. Sometimes more gracefully, sometimes more radically, because it also wasn't good. Also that exists, and we learn from that, and we adjust our action and future projects.
Yeah. You mentioned about reinventing being an architect. I remember it was like 10, 20 years ago. It was a Congress of Polish Architecture in Gdańsk. I was attending there. It was a lecture of Lucien Kroll.
Yep.
And he showed that as he worked with the East Germany I can't remember the city. It was like Leipzig or Dresden or something like this, about like all the Plattenbau buildings district, and then he collaborated with the citizens, and then they recreated like a 19th century street. Exactly, like a
reconstruction.
But actually, it was like they added some additions to the existing buildings, and I said I was quite shocked, but I said, oh, it's a very good way of thinking. It's like this is the path that we could try, and all my friends were shocked and said, no, we should everyone do like. Everyone was a fan of Norman Foster, which was like a icon of the time, you know, constructing huge banks with the huge windows, all glass. And after this 20 years, actually, it turned out that actually Lucien Kroll, he was right. Yeah. Actually, this is the right way to go, because we have like all this old buildings, and a lot of times it's much better to find a new way of reconstructing it, but not for rich people. And this is, I think, this way of thinking.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of cities have become speculation objects. Yeah. But we should not misunderstand that building a city is not gaining a maximum profit. This is not why we have cities. We have actually cities for the citizens who are there, and in some cities you have less citizens and cities shrink, in some you have more. But there's an idea that we very much embrace, is that we should leave no one behind. I think it's also fine if in a city we have very wealthy people. This is excellent. You know, what we really need, we need to keep the young people in cities. I think a city where young people turn their backs on it, where they're walking away, that's the clearest sign that there's something wrong with that place. Where people walk away and they leave the old people behind, where only rich people live, there's a problem too. And I can tell you, when I lived in New York, poor people were becoming invisible. In Manhattan, they were basically picked by the police and delivered outside across the river in some districts in the outer boroughs. When I lived in South America, rich people had to become invisible because it was so dangerous for them that they're driving around there in Caracas today with bulletproof Toyota Corollas, not with Mercedes-Benzes. They're driving around with middle-class cars, but bulletproof because they're so scared. So for me, it is absolutely clear that we need a city which is inclusive, where people can live together. And this is not a dream that is hard to achieve. It is a decision that people in cities can take. And I'm convinced that the best places in the world are exactly the places where different classes, different ages, different people of different walks of life are actually living together. They don't have to share everything. You know, we're working in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Sarajevo, where you have different religious groups and they had a big conflict behind. You don't need to live together and do everything together, but they're living in sort of neighborhoods together where they're sorting out the use of space. They share some spaces on the markets. They go to their synagogue or to their mosque or to their Orthodox churches, and they do some things for themselves, and it works. And I think this idea of a more integrative, inclusive city has actually no age, and the architectural expression that you just explained with Lucien Kroll, that can take very different shapes, but we have to invent and design our own model for our present time. I think we need to know more about our own history, but at the end of the day, we have to design in the now for the people we want to have in a place, not for the ones who can pay the most. This is certainly not city building.
Oh yeah. You mentioned you do work with shrinking cities.
Yes.
And Katowice is one of them. It is shrinking, like for last 25 years, it lost like 1/3 of its population because of different reasons. But what is the solution for the cities like that?
You know, I don't.
You mentioned Detroit.
Yes, obviously I don't. I cannot take a position to know the solution of a city that I just arrived in the afternoon.
But
But
actually,
I
what's
think,
the
but I think
way
yes,
of
I think there's tragedies that I have seen in other places that they work. If you have been 400,000 people and you're now 200,000, maybe the city has to decide to design for a place that will have only 100,000. But that means also that designing and making architecture might be erasing buildings, creating public spaces, bringing agriculture back into the city, and allowing a more pioneering way of using the space rather than holding on to not losing another citizen. I think one could just say, fine, I'm 200,000, let's just think we're 150,000, and let's just agree that we shrink. Look at places with rising sea levels. People building dams, and they're trying in Manhattan or Venice or in other places to hold the water back. I can tell you there's no holding the water back. We just might have to understand that we have to move ahead and move somewhere else and do something better. And I think if that is the reality, there's a space, also a space for urban design and also a space for architecture to offer and be generous and invitive and accept that there's a shrinking process that can also be a great design driver rather than trying to resist it. What I said, you have to keep the young people here to occupy the remaining space. That is the most important question, and to keep good architects here who work with them.
Okay, it looks like there is no easy solution for Katowice. So actually, we have to.
Easy solutions are usually don't leading to a good end. I think it is okay to come together and identify actually the right question to the problem. Easy solutions usually don't lead to very good results. I think it is a good thing to be in a place where there exists a problem and people pull together and do something about it. That is actually the place where you have to be also as an architect.
We have to invite the mayor of Katowice to your lecture tomorrow.
Yes, I do. Let's invite him. Come to our lecture.
Okay. Thank you for your advices for the shrinking cities.
Thanks inviting me. Thanks to be here. And I'm very much interested to learn more about Katowice in the next couple of days and in our workshops.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Thank you.